Hi, this is Jason McCormick. I'm the cinematographer for Monsters, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we've got Jason McCormick, the director of photography for Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story. And it's your return, Jason. You came back for more.
I'm back. I wanted to redeem myself because last time I had COVID, I was on my deathbed. So it's nice to be back healthy this time.
Exactly. This show is, I was just telling you right before we started recording, I enjoyed it. It looked so good. And you were just coming off the heels of the first Monsters, which was the Jeffrey Dahmer story, which everybody was talking about that. So when you go into, I know it's not a sequel to that story, but it's a sequel to the series. When you start prepping, I guess it's part of the same anthology. But do you feel pressure at all when you're going into the next one after the success of the first one?
No, I honestly didn't feel any pressure. If anything, I knew that there was an advantage because the way that it works, like you're saying it's an anthology, or it's totally different, but the packaging is the same. It allows Ryan to do a show on Netflix. And if you look at if you're into this kind of crap, which I'm not terribly, but I am aware, like their most successful shows, the second was Stranger Things season 3. So
Really?
You knew you already kind of had like a baked in audience. And then also when I was approached to do the project, I got the scripts, and the scripts were so good. Like the first 3 scripts that I read. So it was more of like an excitement that, like, a lot of times you do stuff and you're not sure if anybody's going to see it. In this one, there's a little bit more of like, oh, cool. Like, this is going to be seen by a lot of people. So no, I didn't feel any like pressure per se.
Well, when you go into a show like this, you know there will be controversy because the Erik and Lyle stories, like people know it. It's been around for a long time. It's a pop culture thing, very similar to Dahmer. And when you go into something like this where you're portraying, adaptations, if you will, of real stories, real people, how do you approach that? Because you want to make sure you're doing justice to, what actually happened, but at the same time, you need to tell a good story that's visually interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think portraying accurate isn't necessarily my job. I'm given the material, and there's a task at hand. In the case of the Menendez story, I really didn't know a lot about it at the time when it happened. I was a kid. I was doing my own thing. All I knew was that these dudes, shot their parents with shotguns, and it was crazy. And there was a big trial, but it was a different world. We didn't have social media. I wasn't inundated by it. So if you didn't want to pay attention to it, you didn't have to. It was avoidable, I guess, at the time. So to a degree, in my mind, I kind of looked at it as like, well, Ryan wrote that I'm shooting a documentary, and I don't know any of the facts, and I'm learning a little bit. And there's questions that come up, like, is this real? Like, they really fucking played Milli Vanilli at the funeral. And then there's also the fact that it's hard to know what the facts are, other than the fact that they did shoot their parents and the amount of times that they did and the way they did. Everything else, though, falls into a great deal of subjectivity. And I think that was sort of Ryan's point. The point of the project was, it's sort of a whodunit. Who's telling the truth here? What really happened? What didn't? In the event of Dahmer, I didn't really, obviously I knew who he was, but again, I didn't know all the details. So it's sort of like, I don't, come to work with this, like, object agenda to be like I'm the harbinger of the truth. I'm hoping that the people that employed me did that job, and I'm more in line with like, is it day or night? Is it interior, exterior? What's the action? What's the movement? Maybe I'm just a simple man.
Well, I can appreciate that focus. That's for sure. And that is what you should be paying attention to. And you did it really well. So
Thank you.
let's shift into that because I want to talk
Thank
about
you.
the overall lighting and look of the series. How do you describe it when and I'm going to ask you, how do you describe the lighting and the look of Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story?
Um, it's always driven for me. I'm always, unless it's like, unless there's like a magic realism or there's a fantasy element or a theatrical element, I feel like I'm always just based off of naturalism. Um, and so you're trying to capture, the light, trying to capture the feeling of Los Angeles, of Beverly Hills, of also like the color palette, of the '90s, of that era. I think kind of I feel like I wanted to, because it was based on naturalism. I think my first real true motivation was like the feeling of like scattered light, like
Mm.
the way that the light comes into a room, with the hard sun, bounces around, it goes all over the place. So I wanted to play with that a lot. That was like my first thought, was like, I want to feel the light. I want to feel the sunshine. I want to feel it bounce around. Um, and then Ryan, Ryan tends to like pick a color that is a driving force. I think for Dahmer, he said, urinal cake yellow, but really what he was talking about was a tungsten light in a hallway that photographed really yellow. In this, I think he really wanted to feel the blue, like a steely blue, like a Basic Instinct blue. Like he wanted to feel like that '90s kind of blue steel type thing. So I take that and I hear it, but it really, that drives the production design. So like the interior of the living room might have like blue shears, and then I'm always just kind of like looking. I'm attracted to color contrast. So the warms and the cools, but the gold, the golden light, Gold Coast, warm sunshine. Um, I also felt motivated by the wardrobe and the pops of color. So it was really just like a really fun palette to play with. But I guess like to answer your question, if I'm doing that in the most simplistic terms, is just really like motivating from like, natural light and figuring out ways. I mean, we tested, we had tools, we did things to kind of motivate that bounce and the skip around. And then just letting it do its thing, trying to like light the environment, so to speak, so that we could have more freedom, in our blocking and not be so pinned.
I saw a lot of orange and teal, that's for sure. Tungsten, teal coming in. I love that contrast. And I thought what was interesting to me is that you had kind of like the happy tungsten, not necessarily tungsten, but like you had the happy warm light, and then you had the dark, dreary scenes, the scenes where obviously the murder scene, still incorporating that warmth, but it was so clearly not a happy warmth. It was a dark, scary, creepy warmth. And I thought that was interesting to be able to utilize the same kind of color palette in the more emotional, graphic scenes as you did in the happier scenes. It was interesting to me.
Mm.
I guess that's an I had no idea whether we were doing that reaction or a I don't think you're making any sense reaction,
No, I mean, I don't think
which is both fine.
I didn't, I don't really, you know, it's hard. I never want to try to over intellectualize it, for me. I feel like, that's a night interior. They're watching TV. The lights are low. This is what it looks like. In the middle of the day, in another setting when the sun's coming in, this is what it looks like. I guess I try to feel like there's a level of objectivity to the lighting where it's not like I'm not Storaro. Like I'm not going in and saying, well, this red represented this or this. I'm not getting into that, and it's not out of disrespect, or it's not because I'm not capable of it. I just don't try to. It's like this is. I try to just give the realist interpretation with taste to each environment that we shoot in. Again, if it's something more like, I'm shooting Blade Runner, or there's an opportunity to lean into more stylized, and it is naturalism stylized to a degree, but it wasn't like, okay, this is happy, this is sad. It's much more simple, and I think that keeping it in this simplicity allows me a lot more freedom, when it comes down to actually shoot it. You're trying to just create, like, okay, I don't want to get in the way of things. I don't want to be fighting like an idea or a concept. It's simple. This is a night interior in a living room with a couple who were just watching TV, and then they get murdered by their kids. What would the house look like? Well, they wouldn't have like every light turned on, I wouldn't think. It's late night. They're a couple. They're not expecting company. So all those things kind of like come into play in terms of the decisions, but it's not like happy orange or sad orange.
So I'm picking things up in my own internal.
That's good though, but that's good though. I mean, I think like maybe there's
what does that say about me?
I mean, it says that it moved you, and I think that sometimes, when you do these interviews or you read about these things, sometimes maybe knowing the truth isn't really what's best. It's good to like have your own interpretation and have let there be some mystery about it. Because
we want to know the truth here, James. We want the truth, whether it's Jason. I'm sorry. We want the truth, no matter what. That's what we want.
Right.
Let's talk about that murder scene, episode 1. You knew that you were going to be filming this. Everybody watching knows that they're going to be seeing a portrayal of this. How do you prep for something like that? What was going through your mind?
Extensively, way more than I wanted. Way more than I wanted. I mean, keep in mind, we were in the middle of a 5-month strike. So when we were prepping this show, the show was supposed to start shooting like way before. So we're in the middle of a strike, and there's only so much you can do. But they wanted to just talk about it over and over and over, and really like, get everybody's head around it. And there's a level of intimidation, I suppose, because prosthetics wants to know, stunts wants to know, the actors, of course, I'm sure they're curious, and everybody's like curious on what you want to do. In the script, in the original version, it was written as a oneer. Really? Which is what I had held on to when I read it, and as I was approaching it. And I had thought of something, I guess you could use the word maybe a little bit more artful, where, you could leave an action and you're coming on, and, when you're doing something like that, there's no break. So you have to use sound. But as we got closer, and then finally, had a conversation with Ryan about it, and after talking a lot about Carl and our first AD, Spencer. And we were all kind of into the idea of it being a oneer. Ryan didn't want that. He really wanted to see everything. He wanted it to be graphic. And it took me a minute, but I understood why. And the essence was that he actually wanted to really emphasize the brutality and the gruesomeness, specifically because over the course of a 9-hour journey that this project is, he wanted it to linger in your head, like regardless of like how, everything was kind of heightened, like the actors, no disrespect to Lyle and Erik, but they weren't as good looking as Cooper and Nick, so everything is a little bit heightened, like Hollywood. It's glamour, especially in the first one. It's glamorous. And if you recall at the time, like so many people were writing them love letters and falling in love with them, and but they never saw that. They never got to see that. I don't even know if they got to see the stills of it. And we did. You kind of had to look at it for reference, and that was fucked up. But if you have that in your head throughout the story, it's like no matter what you end up feeling, like you can never deny that or forget that. Like I said, that's the one undisputed truth, that they did that. Everything else is sort of like subjective, where what was their relationship, or what did the father do or didn't do, or the mom, or all these things. But whatever you say, you can't deny that that happened. And so I think he wanted to emphasize the brutality of it. So it changed the approach, obviously. You're not now, in a way, excuse me, in a way it got, it simplified it, because the choreography required to do a oneer is substantially different than like, okay, well, I need to be here, I need to be here, I need to be there. And then it was just a bunch of planning and getting the angles down, and then, building the prosthetics, and extensive conversations about, the shotguns, and, is there ammo? Is it going to be like, blanks? Or are we doing everything in VFX, and like how? And so it's a lot of like conversation into doing it, that by the time you get to do it, there's like a level of anticipation and excitement, but you're so prepared, and where you need to be for every moment. It's just really about, I gotta think of a different word than execution, but it's just about doing the job,
And it doesn't let you off the hook. That opening, it's not an opening scene, but that scene in the first episode doesn't let you off the hook. You see it all. There's nothing left to the imagination.
That's right.
It is gruesome.
Yeah.
And you're right. It does stick with you throughout the whole thing. And they do, they kind of go back to that moment, but that's the only time that you really see the entire act taking place. And it was gross. It was gory. It was terrible to watch.
I can't imagine, because I was so ready for everything. So I can only imagine not knowing what was going to happen and seeing that for the first time. I don't know. I can't imagine what that must have felt like. But you get so desensitized to it because you're prepping it, and so much is happening in post. It's not like I'm really seeing, her hand be blown off or something like that. The screaming was challenging, because you have to do it so many times, hearing Chloe scream over and over, even if it is work, maybe just on an animal level, that kind of gets to you after a little while. And I'm sure it took a lot out of her, but yeah.
It's interesting to hear you say that murder scene was going to be a oneer, because episode 5, probably the most talked about episode of the entire series, is a full 30-minute oneer, the whole episode. And I thought that was a really interesting choice. I'd love to hear from your perspective. First of all, was that always the intention, is to have episode 5 be a oneer?
The script is written as such.
Okay.
And then you know how it is, man. Like you get closer and people start to like, I don't want to say they get scared, but they start to question it or second guess it a little bit.
What about you? Did you
No,
fall
I was
into that
always
camp?
about it. I was always about it, but I finally got the stage. The stage was built, and I finally get in there, and I didn't even know who the director was going to be yet. But I walked this set with Ryan, and he was like, "What are you thinking?" And I started it with more of a movement, like bringing her from the door, and then going like a true like oneer where I could like come off of her and then go on to him. But I think it's like sometimes in these situations, as a cinematographer, you only get one chance to plead your case or to make your pitch, and you have to really be conscious of like how you're doing it. In hindsight, I think when I was doing this, I think it gave him a feeling of like a serpent, is what he said. And he's like, oh, I don't want to do anything like serpentine. Like I don't, and he's like, if we do that, I just rather, we just do cuts. And I was like, no, 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 no. You have to do it as a oneer. It has to be a oneer. It's like just so strong as a oneer for a performance. And I always think of like Hunger, Steve McQueen movie. They shot 2 perf, and they have back when it was film and only film. And there's a 50-50 on the table that's 20 minutes long, which is 1,000-foot roll, 2 perf. So just the intensity. I hate cutting. No disrespect to the editors, but I don't like it. Every time you cut, you're forcing a perspective, or you're taking somebody out, and you're telling somebody where to look, rather than just like, I'm just holding on you right now. Like, so after a while I can look and I can see there's a monkey in the background, and I can kind of become a little bit one with the environment because I have the time to do that. Just like somebody might be like, there's that plant is almost touching my head. When you're constantly cutting, I think you take the audience's ability to think out of the equation, and you force them to think. So I was definitely opposed to it. Then we finally got a director, and he did a rehearsal, and he was second guessing it and wondering. And I was just like, oh, bro, like just keep it as one, keep it as one. And I think if I was we did like 7 takes. I think the take that we chose, as we passed her, I kept the frame and I dragged it as much as I could, so you could feel her. You could feel her in the intensity of her point of the story, talking about her father, and then pass. So it was as close as I got to doing that. But it was a lot of dialogue, a lot of preparation. Cooper was like, he's a young, hungry actor. And I'm sure his whole life has changed, as rightfully so. So he was ready for it. He was prepared for it. So the two of us were definitely like in the like don't cut camp. And I'm glad they stuck to it. It's tripped me out a bit that that's the one in terms of photography that seems to get the most discussion.
Why?
Because it's like it's so simple. There's nothing. What I had was a world class, my dolly grip Charlie, and we had a motion control rig that we could manually control, and he just had the script, and we knew where we needed to be at what point and when we wanted to land. So it's technical, but in terms of like the scope of it or the range of it or the challenge, it's like we did so many, like we did different periods in episode 6. There's so much, like, I think, lighting that I'm really proud of. And it's like everybody, like my friends, everyone's talked about 5. And I'm like, it's weird because you're just like, it's really, he's just pushing it.
It's so interesting because it really does. You always hear like, well, it's just, if there's not good acting, not good writing, no one cares. And when it's brought down to just that, like that's all there is in that scene, is just great acting, great writing. Obviously it looks amazing, but like you said, it's a single shot pushing in. But like, it is amazing how after all is said and done, that is what people respond to, is just
it's tripped me out. It's tripped me out. You have to do like submissions for awards. The studios hit you up, and I always think it's really strange because it's sort of like, it's like asking like on a feature, like what's the best scene to nominate for an Oscar? You nominate, like, you want the whole project. It's hard to pick out one episode and be like, okay, well, this represents. But the thought of like, okay, well, that's the submission. It's like, but clearly it's
Did
the
I
one
even need to be here?
Yeah. I mean, I was operating, believe it or not, quite a bit. Yeah, I had to have it turned down all the way. So I was turning the wheels a lot, but the speed was like I had it turned down at minimum. So you had to like keep an imperceivable correction because obviously it's not coming in. So I did need to be there. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've done harder things collectively than that. But
Well, let's
the
talk about, because
most of the tension was just like him nailing it, really, you know,
yeah,
like, and he nailed it every fucking time. He never flubbed. We did it 8 times, I think 7 or 8 times over 2 days, and he stuck it every single time.
amazing. Well, what an opportunity for him. And he delivered. I mean, it's just great. The whole thing really worked out great. And obviously, it resonated with people because viewers are talking about it like crazy. It's different, it's unique. But I want to talk about an episode that you particularly liked. Not to say you didn't like that, but something where you feel like, maybe you really challenged yourself or overcame something, or you just want to highlight in this conversation.
I really enjoyed 6 because I think I mean, knowing myself at this point through assisting and now shooting, it's going on like 15 years. It's always there's always like a relationship between the experience and the work. And 6 was just such a like I felt really free. You know, I felt like I was in a really good flow state with Max, our director, Max Winkler, who was just like great to work with, really great leader, and we had a good harmony going. And I think I really enjoyed doing the backstory of Jose and Kitty. You know, the like there's always like they killed their parents, or they molested him, or they but to humanize them, to kind of be like he was an immigrant who came from Cuba, and she was, a beauty queen, and like they had dreams and they had hopes. And I think being a parent, kind of like that struck with me, like the idea of them falling in love, which we shot a bit more than ended up in the show. But the bits, that's always how it is. Like you love it, but I guess it can't all fit. But I think going back and photographing that and doing something just so romantic, something from a different era, I really, really loved it. And I think it's also, it was really like kind of like the big like Javier Bardem episode. So it was like a lot of scenes with him. And I feel like there was no, I didn't feel hindered creatively in any way. I felt like I really was free, and that's the one. That's the one that I think's like that was like my favorite. That's why I'm tripping on like 5, because I was like, "Was you guys didn't see 6, or did you just were tripping on 5? You forgot about it, or you took it for granted."
I
But
love that one too.
I really enjoyed that one.
Javier's story is wild. I love the way you
Yeah,
guys covered it. It made the story full. It made the story
yeah,
well-rounded. You really covered everything in that episode, especially for having it placed after 5. Like
right.
the telling of the most gruesome, horrible thing possible, and then to go
Well,
to
I love.
the parents were in love.
Well, what
It
I
was
loved too
wild.
about 5 was like I think the first 4, you're kind of, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, you're kind of finding your footing.
Mm.
And I think you're kind of figuring out, in the editorial, in everything, in the photography, performances, everything, you're kind of getting your bearings. And I think in the first 4, there's a ton of cuts. There's lots of edits. Um, and because there's so much information to push, it's kind of like you have to. And I loved that we got to 5 and it was like, no more cuts. You got to stop. Let's just stop for a second and just focus. And then you go into something a little bit more romantic and overtly beautiful. I like that transition. And then going into like the back half of the episodes. Like I really liked working on 8 with Ian, who's fucking hilarious and amazing. He's just awesome. Fucking really, really, really smart guy. Really fun, really funny. And it's so ludicrous, all the Judalon moments. And it's kind of almost like it read as a comedy. Like episode 8 reads like it's a comedy.
I'm pulling it up right here
And
so I can refresh my memory. That obviously we're in the courtroom for that, right?
yeah, you were. I mean, we shot a lot of stuff that wasn't in the courtroom, but it's a lot of like just Jude Alon's story and, being with her. And it's just like her story is so bananas. It's so bonkers
Oh,
that
yeah, 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 yeah. Yep.
it's there was it was a lot of laughs when we were working on that. That was a lot of fun to work on. It was a lot of fun working with Ian, because Ian also comes from acting. So I like working with all the directors. Directors have different strengths, and a lot of it depends on their background. When I've worked with actors, when I've worked with directors who were or are actors, it's always fun for me because when you're blocking, when you're prepping, they're performing. So I really get a chance to observe, which is what I like to do, rather than being with them and observing somebody else and kind of like orchestrating. Like they get into the character, and then you're already in a state of like figuring it out in the most purest level. And Ian's hilarious, like portraying Leslie Abramson and all these different characters. It was hilarious, a lot of fun.
I want to talk technical a little bit as we kind of round out our conversation. Earlier in the episode, you had mentioned scattered light is part of your philosophy for the series. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that and also how you achieve that? Maybe a couple of examples.
Um, it happened so much. We use these. I think they're called light bridge tools. They're light bridge. They're these reflector cards that my key grip Ray Garcia had, and they come in different shapes and sizes, and different strengths. And when the light comes, when the sunlight comes smacking into the ground, um, you could catch it with one of these like reflector cards and help kind of like magnify it, or you could put it by a lamp and help. Like it would allow me, in a way, the idea, the philosophy is yeah,
Is
those.
this what you were talking about?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they're like
light
little,
bridge.
they're like mirrors almost. And they,
Kinda, and they come in different sizes up to like I think 42 inches. Shout out to Lightbridge, um, looking for a sponsorship. Uh, they they have they have different intensities, and so like you don't want something to feel lit. I don't. I and in a way like, and Ray would be like, he fucking hates lights. Like I don't want a fucking light. So the idea of the scattered light, or letting the light move around or catching it, it's going to feel more natural. Like if you had like a lamp, and we like in Oziel's office, the therapist's office, we used them a lot. Like it's skipping down, but like how do you do a return? Well, maybe somebody might actually put a light there, but now you have a light in front of the actor, and when I go to do a wide or something, now it can't be there. So based on what the frame was, you could hide these things down low. The light's hitting down low, and then I could push it back up, or I could put it next to a lamp. Or very rarely, very rarely we would light into it. But I think the idea of that scattered light is just letting it bounce all around and do its thing. And then I think you kind of find this sort of like naturalism, as you would, if you're sitting in your couch and sun's coming through the window and it bounces around, and you'll see it. You see it in your life every day, restaurants, wherever you go. It's beautiful. It's just for filmmaking, to manufacture it, it's a little bit more of a challenge. But those things right there, they made a huge difference. It also changes the dynamic of your set to a degree, because I think, like you go into other countries, Europe or even like Mexico City, like your grip isn't necessarily going to be doing that. Like they're not in charge of lighting per se. They might be more camera support, or the gaffer's kind of running the show. But in this instance, it puts a lot of responsibility on your key grip to actually light. I mean, he's the one that's pushing that light around, and then working in conjunction with the gaffer to be like, okay, well, maybe if you just aim this light just a little bit this way, like they can work together. But it increases the engagement, of your crew, because now it's like there's another element in here that's like, well, that's a grip. Is it a light? So it's, and I think Ray having an engineer's kind of mind, it's almost like you have to, there's math to it. There's angles. It's like playing pool or something. Like you have to understand, and the intensity and choosing which flavor and how big, and then just it's just this thing, and it's punchy.
Yeah.
And just aiming it just right, so it gets like right into the eyes. You see, like it creates a lot of beautiful highlights.
We covered these things when it first came out many years ago now, and it's fun to see it, growing into the company that it is and being used on professional projects.
I became aware of it a couple years ago from actually my key grip from Dahmer. Works with Masa, and they were doing a film out in Pittsburgh, and he showed me a set on the outside. And this is another way to use it, is you could go from outside a window on a set or out, practically you smack an actual light into that thing, and then you want the punch to come in so it feels like the light's coming in through the window. It's hard if you do it with a light, or you can't always get the correct angle just because of the physics of it.
Yeah.
So he showed me it, and he's like, you should check this out. I think you might like it. And I was like, yeah, it looks cool, but it's, if it's not on the truck when I'm working, I'm not gonna, maybe I probably won't even think of it.
Yeah.
But Ray had a small set. He didn't even have like every flavor. I can only imagine, like, the big 4x4, the big 42-inch. So, yeah. And now working in New York on this next one, I've talked to my key grip, who fortunately has worked with it. We talked for like 30 minutes about 2 different product names, and I'm like, no, you got to try this.
You're hooked now.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's to me, it's like, I can't imagine not using it again. Like, and I think I would be like frustrated if somebody didn't have it now, because it's sort of like we use like, I've used like spun silver, I've used muslin, I've used gold, I've used all these different flavors to kind of do the same thing for years. But this source, and it would be interesting if they made it in different colors, or if they had golds or something. But now that you have this, it's sort of like it's giving me everything that I've always wanted from a card, or we would just make our own, make circles, like whatever, you make different shapes, different sizes. Now you have something that is a much smaller footprint, but much more refined.
What camera package did you choose for Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story?
I shot with the Alexa 35. I use the Tribe 7 lenses. I felt like the 35 for me, I used it on Capote, and I kind of got to know it. I feel like, and I felt like because of the era, Super 35 just felt right for me. Also, it just feels like Ari asked me to give them a quote about it, and it's honest. My mind, I just think of it like, okay, this is like a 35 millimeter film stock. Yeah, I know it's digital, but it's basically like an endless film stock attached to this camera, because they could have made maybe like like what Venice does, where they just have this one big sensor and you can crop in and make it whatever size you want. To specifically make a Super 35 sensor, a Super 35 camera, and then coming from a film background that I have, it's sort of like you create this LUT and you can create this look, and then that's the film stock that's forever loaded into that camera. It simplifies it for me. And I'm still stunned by the ability, like lighting wise, like again, you're shooting scattered light, but having like 15 stops of latitude. So I can reach into the shadows and still have this nice roll off on the highlights, the color fidelity, the controllability, the ability, like I wasn't able to, I never tried intentionally, but I never naturally was able to break it. It never was like, fuck, like this is too much. Like I'm too low, or I shouldn't push the sensor this hard. It was like, never for how I like to work. Cause I think some people want to be like, well, it shoots 6400. So like, I'm not trying to like augment the way I work. I'm going to light it. I want to light it kind of like to my eye and just, and for the style and the approach that I work, I didn't have any issues with it. And then you take it in and you can just push it, bend it all around. And I've been in situations in the past where maybe I went too low and it was too thin, and then I'm fucked, you know, or doing green screen and now their teeth are green because I was too low. Like never ran into any of that. The only knock, if I was going to have a criticism, is I wish they had one stop NDs, but like whatever, kind of nothing's perfect, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it's important even today for cinematographers to have experience with actual film?
Um, yeah. I guess, I mean, it's hard for me to say because I do. So, and I don't know. I've never really been asked that question, so I hadn't really thought of it. But yeah, like my colorist I worked with, Mike Katzer on this, works in printer lights. So, you know, working in printer lights, like a point of blue or a point of yellow, like understanding I guess, yeah. I mean, understanding like, it's sort of like learning to walk before you run, because the foundations are the same. You hear things like them saying they don't want the negative to be too thin and in digital, and you're like, well, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, it means that if it's too low in light in film, the negative would have it's thin. Like with my mentor, we worked with um, Harris, rest in peace. You know, we would pull it and it's underexposed, so it'd be like literally like it's a thin negative. There's not a lot. It's falling apart. But you're applying that to digital is a terminology, and I don't think if you understand shooting film, how you would even know what the fuck that means.
Mm.
Um, and I think there's a discipline with shooting film, and an approach um, that brings a set together that can be lost when shooting digital. So I think maybe that's something that I unconsciously have brought over. You know, I shoot predominantly single camera. I like to be focused. I don't like to just, you know, endlessly let the camera roll and just do like thousands of takes for the sake of it. Those are all things that you get, you know, from shooting film. You don't want to do that. You want to be more efficient and more concise. I think just, yeah, having that understanding of it as a foundation, I think is extremely valuable. However, I'm sure there's young cinematographers who don't. There's also like the elitism, or the artistic elitism of film, and I think in another respect, a lot of young photographers only want to shoot film. You know, young cinematographers as a form of validation, and I think that's equally as naive, because I don't think it's about that when it comes down to it. It's about like the quality you're looking for, and the feeling overall of the aesthetic. And there's lots of different ways to do that, you know. So I've never been one to lean on a crutch, you know. So, but I think the longer you do it, the more experience you have in different things. Yeah, I think it's important to just be well-rounded and kind of have a full understanding of the entirety of the craft, in order to like inform your decision for that day, or why are you going to approach a project a certain way.
Mm. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is immersive filmmaking. I called you James by accident about half an hour ago. And the reason why is because I had James Friend on my mind purposely because I wanted to ask you if you had seen or heard anything about the Apple Vision Pro film Submerged. It's like a 17-minute short film, but really high budget, high end. But it's that 180 degree dual 4K, so each eye gets a 4K image film. Curious if you even know anything about it, if you have any thoughts on immersive film at all as sort of another filmmaking technique.
No, that's the first I've heard of it. I'm completely unaware. I'm aware of the Apple, the goggles, and I've heard interesting things about it. But I have so many films I need to catch up with just these two eyes that I haven't gotten around to that. And I'm so gadgeted out as it is. I don't know if I need another one, but that sounds incredible. I think that's what it's all about, is like pushing and evolving. And I think, just there's like this, I think there's expectations. And I think that that's part of maybe a problem with our industry to a certain degree. And the idea of getting comfortable, the idea that this is how it should be, or this is what it is, or if you really follow the craft and the medium from its earliest inception, 24 frames, the guy on the horse, and you're in the penny slot in the pharmacy, and then you're in a movie palace, and then you're on a phone. I think that that's the idea, is to forever to be evolving. Like David Bowie should be your icon, because it's just always meshing and not fighting the times, but learning to understand them and find a way to be expressive within them. So, whatever the next thing that's coming, those are all exciting. It's all exciting to me. And I think that, it's the one thing I've gotten, I've gone on like deep trips where I've really gotten into like analyzing this stuff. And I think the thing that I would be saddened by that is the communal experience versus an isolated experience. I think that the idea of like cinema being a shared experience is something that I like to hold on to, because there's something very different about being in a theater watching a movie with the lights out, and you're not allowed to look on your phone and get up, or take breaks and do all this shit, and the streaming and the things that are brought into our home, they become more isolating, and they really have to be at the highest level to give you a cinematic experience. Like Ripley, for example. I watched Ripley, and you couldn't look on your phone. Like I didn't want to miss a frame. Like I didn't want to have to I would, if I did and I looked at my phone, I'd have to rewind, because I was like, I just missed something incredible. So the idea of doing that it's interesting to me, but it's also like, I worry that, I hope they all can coexist, because I don't want to ever lose that experience of like cinema and the idea of like being in a theater with a group of people, a packed theater, watching like a beautiful print or whatever, laser projection with incredible sound, and just having that experience, and having it, replaced by like, I'm just going to be some like gummy bear in a zero gravity chair floating with tubes feeding me, and I just have vision. Like, I don't want to get too into that, but I'm sure it's dope as fuck, whatever he did. He's a great cinematographer.
Well said. Jason McCormick, thank you so much for being on the Go Creative Show. Of course, the entire 9 episodes, I think it was, of Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story are available now on Netflix. Worth a watch if you haven't seen it already. But if you're watching this episode, you probably saw it. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a boring conversation. So we hope you saw it. But we love having you on. And thank you so much for being on Go Creative Show.
Thanks for having me back, Ben. Nice to see you again.